I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. All right, today on Hard Knocks, I interview John J. Lennon, a journalist and convicted murderer. His articles have been published in The New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, Esquire, and the Marshall Project. His 2025 book, The Tragedy of True Crime, tells the story of 4 convicted murderers, including himself, and critiques how the true crime industry dehumanizes, distorts, and monetizes the pain of both victims and perpetrators. I just realized now that I am literally wearing the sweatshirt that I wore in prison, unintentionally, maybe subconsciously, in anticipation of this conversation, which was super interesting and stimulating. This book was really challenging for me to read for reasons that I bring up in over the course of the conversation, but above all because it's really interested in this idea of how true crime uh, sort of solidifies or like keeps people crystallized in the worst moment of their life. And, John J. Lennon here is arguing that actually what happens afterwards and the way that human beings are capable of change, even if they don't necessarily change, is more interesting than the true crime narratives that we see that are so simplified and black and white, all of which is like I'm on board with, as you all know. However, I read a lot of this book and confronted John J. Lennon about the fact that so much of what he was talking about reminded me of Rudy Guede and how he has failed. He has made excuses and not made amends for what he has done. And how do I wrap my mind around that as someone who is wanting to hold everyone's moral complexity in mind? And really, it's just had me confronting my limitations as someone who, you know, attempts to confront with curiosity and compassion complicated realities. So great, really interesting themes about, the ethical responsibility of journalism, about the trauma of misrepresentation, about humanizing prisoners and prison life for public consumption, grappling with the good and bad and the evil of true crime. So enjoy.
Hello, this is a free call from
John.
To accept this free call, press 1.
Hi.
Hi, is this John?
Yeah, hi, Amanda. Nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you too. All right. Thanks so much for getting on with me. I know that we have to be in fits and starts because prison life. So I just kind of want to just dive into it. I have been deep diving into your book, and I think one of the first things that struck me was that you diagnosed or you distinguished between genres in a way that I hadn't done before, which was you said that there's true crime and then there's its spinoff, true innocence. And I was wondering if you could explain that distinction and how those two genres are similar or different.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the introduction of my book. I mean, I think true innocence is traditional true crime is this idea of like kind of telling, sort of entertaining the audience with tales of murder for pure entertainment. I think on its surface, true innocence is perhaps more admirable. At least, I think it has a lot to do with entertainment too. But I think there is a purpose, at least on the surface, for the story to be told. Think Serial, think Adnan Syed, the whole resurgence of true crime in that podcast. It was this sort of you know potential investigation of an injustice, right?
Mhm.
But I think there's a lot of gray area in there, and which is probably the conflict of your life, and it's just this idea of which is very attractive for the audience is it's that's the conflict is did he do it? Didn't he do it? Did he? And
Mhm.
that's where the story has this conflict. With traditional true crime, it's just like you want to watch murder for entertainment? Like, here we go.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you for like it got the cogs in my head going a little bit because I think you're right that in its most ideal form, true innocent stories are stories that are attempting to right an injustice, like they have some sort of advocacy purpose behind them. I'm thinking of, have you ever seen The Thin Blue Line? That's like one of the first like true innocence, big time true innocence stories. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's a famous doc by
Yeah.
director. Yeah,
Oh,
he's
God. I should know his name because I did a whole series on the history of true crime, and I talked at length about his documentary. But off the top of my head, I'm horrible at remembering anybody's names. Who are you? Who am I talking to? Um, yeah, so it's one of those at the very beginning, like people are starting to go, okay, this isn't just true crime stories are not just lurid tales for entertainment. And it's really almost I think what's interesting about True Innocence at its best is that it's attempting to subvert true crime by causing us to question who we think are villains and who we think are victims, who we like question our assumptions and a question and sort of have a broader understanding of how these stories reflect bigger systemic and societal issues. Um, that said, like in my experience, as someone who has been at the center of a true innocence scandal story. Um, I've also seen how True Innocence does the exact same thing as true crime, which is, and it ends up just being a kind of inversion of the true crime plot where but it can be equally simplistic and moralistic storytelling where there's very black and white narrative about who's a victim, who's a villain, who's a hero, zero nuance, zero gray areas. And so I think that uh, any sort of storytelling around crime, whether it be the story of someone's innocence or someone's guilt, tends to uh, be tempted by that simplistic narrative. And I'm wondering if you could maybe talk to me about when you have looked at true crime narratives, especially as someone who's still living on the inside and is living the consequences of people's consumption of true crime. What is your take on how people are telling these stories and what they're getting wrong?
Yeah, so that's why I wrote the book. I mean, just the idea of true innocence, just to sort of transition from that to to answering your question. I mean, I think many of us in prison want to be the innocent man because you become the sympathetic character, right? I
Mm,
think I think the definition of story is when the sympathetic character overcomes a complicated situation that he or she solves, right?
mhm.
And the antagonist becomes the system itself,
Right.
the crooked, so it's like so everyone comes in. The problem is, a lot of people are lying about that, right? About being, because, and that becomes this overall, and it's sometimes, and most times, it's not even about this sort of complication. It's not even about them because they're bad people and they're trying to compound their what they did. It's just that sometimes especially in New York and many states in America, you get these astronomical sentences. So it's like you kind of like gotta like just fight the motion, and fight your case, and you try to like you kind of like for any type of appeal or post conviction motion, you kind of be like, yeah, I didn't do it, and this is a wrongful conviction because of this constitutional issue, and I don't want to do 100 years to life
Mhm.
for drug dealer beef that we're So it's this different. There's many reasons why people claim it. I'm not sort of casting aspersions on that. But I entered this from somebody that takes full responsibility, for what I did, and I also became a journalist in prison, and I sort of my idea of what I sort of thought that I can, to answer your question, kind of tell a story differently is just I had a story told about me when I
Mhm.
was that's how that was like sort of my entry point into this genre. I've kind of like found my voice, and I had become a writer in Attica. I was participating in a workshop, and I had transferred from them. I started writing for different magazines, and then eventually I found myself on this show with Chris Cuomo, and it was this unfortunate experience where I was sort of solicited and lied to about to come on the show. It was a grooming. Like oh my God, we love your work. This is this.
Mm.
You're a redemption story, and it was none of that. They lied to me about the name of the show, and I was just taken back at the time. I was in Sing Sing. I'm still in Sing Sing, and his brother was the governor, and this was like I was like, I want to talk to this guy. His brother has the power to let me go. Of course, I want to talk to Chris Cuomo. And it just became like this awful power dynamic. And I know you had your own story with him,
Yeah.
but
I was going to say,
but
we have that in common, my friend.
yeah. So it was just that type of vibe. And when I saw like what that show had become, I was like, this sucks. Like I'm gonna just like they got the right one when they came to do that with me, and I just so part of me started criticizing true crime in my magazine writing,
Mhm.
and then I got a book deal, and I said, you know what, I could do this better than you guys because I have the access, and I'm gonna do it, and I want to tell stories, the full story. So to answer
Mm.
your question, it's the there when we watch true crime, we sort of like see why the person came to kill, sort of you see a few red herrings and blah blah blah, and then the conviction, and then it's over. But there's this whole other half of the show, I mean of the story that isn't told. So that's what I like. That's I like to think that I did with my book, telling the stories of these three men with my own living through.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, there's a lot I wanna get unpack with that, but, like, I've been writing down different little, like, quotes that I wanted to, um, talk to you about, and one of them is where you talk about, let's see, where is this quote? You say, "That's only half the story. I contend that the lives lived in prison after a crime are just as fascinating and important as those that were spiraling before it." Because you write about how in true crime, people really seem to be interested in the killer's life only insofar as it attempts to explain why the crime happened. And it was interesting, like, this was a surprisingly challenging book for me to read, um, because I still have not really reckoned with the person who murdered my roommate and then subsequently blamed me for his crimes, and, like, continues, like, to this day to say that he didn't do it, to not take responsibility, and to throw people under the bus for it. And, uh, in and so, like, as somebody who has basically spent my entire adult life trying to understand why I was harmed indirectly and directly by him, but also, directly by the criminal justice system, a part of me understands the perspective of those who would say, fuck that guy. Like, I don't care. I don't fucking care about his redemption arc because he doesn't like nothing he can do can undo what he did. And I'm wondering, like, can you talk to me about knowing as a writer and like that you are confronting that yourself?
Right. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a journal. I'm a first-person journalist. I mean, one of the first words I ever wrote as a first-person journalist was it was swift and cowardly. I was
Mm,
talking about the man that I killed and the murder that I committed. So, I mean, for me, it's like I mean, I had to. I mean, I intuitively. There was nobody in my. There's no script on this. When I was in the workshop, there wasn't like the professor wasn't like, "This is what you got to do. You have to have.
mhm,
You have to be honest. Have agency." In fact, a lot of people in the workshop, I would ding them for not coming clean with their crimes. They wanted to talk about how bad Attica was. I was like, nobody gives a fuck about like you being an Attica. Like, if you don't tell them what you did to get here, like
mm,
own your shit, and then talk about the prison. treatment and all that other stuff, how bad Attica is and all that other stuff. But like, and a lot of them, so for me, it was something that became natural. And to be fair, and I sort of unpack this in the book a bit. There's a pecking order in prison, right? And you
Hmm.
know this. I mean, maybe I don't know, not so much maybe with women, but with men there are, and it's a major pecking order. And so if you're in here for I don't know, like just a sexual crime or just hurting women or kids or something, you maybe it's a little harder to talk about that. I mean, but for me, I'm not saying it was easy for me, but I could wrap my head around what I did, and I don't know if I was sort of accountable and understood how far-reaching the harm I caused was when I had caused with my crime. But I knew I could talk about it because I think people could understand it. Like you can
Hmm.
understand when people who are selling drugs in that lifestyle, how one man can kill another man over drug terrorists, over this, over that. And I thought, and even though I was glib in some of my earlier writing, I knew I could lay that on the lap of the reader, and I could tell them a story journalistically about what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's what that's how I approached my journalism.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say that it was really, really refreshing to read. It was actually very emotional for me to read. Things like, I mean, and what's so like, I think what's really fascinating about it is you return to it over and over again in the book. It's not like you say it even one time, like I did a bad thing. Like you return to it over and over again, reflecting on your culpability, and it really shows a refreshing amount of like depth and breadth of introspection and how you've evolved in your thinking about it. You like, again, sorry to like quote your own writing back at you, but like a lot of it really impressed me. So for instance, you write, what I was oblivious to then and realize now was that me trying to get away with it at trial, not once but twice, compounded my culpability and hurt my victim's sister and the rest of his family all the more. And then you go on to say later on, I understand why the family of the man I murdered doesn't want me to overcome prison and find success. They want me to feel the punishment of prison forever because their pain is forever. And so perhaps it's brazen, insulting even for me to want more from my life. It was wrong for me to take an account of his life before I killed him and tell myself, as I hinted in some of my earlier writing, that I'm not so bad because I killed another criminal in the life. I can't say that and then in the same breath ask that my character not be defined by my crime. It's hypocritical. Like all of this like deep, you don't just stop at the like you really show that you're somebody who has really thought hard about accountability. And it's a really refreshing and very healing thing for me to read because like any victim, that's what they want to know that the person who harmed them cares. Like that they just fucking care and that they recognize that harm was done. And it seems like you've really reflected on that, which is why it's so interesting that, you know, in your book you make the case that this project, this human project of evolution that you've undergone and that the characters in your book have undergone, these real people that you interviewed and documented, but like also not, all of them have owned their crimes. I'm thinking specifically of one person who you interviewed, who I've actually done journalism about, Robert Chambers, who is just like frustratingly incapable of coming to terms in the way that you and the other people in your book you describe in your book. And you also acknowledge that in your book, a lot of people in prison do not ultimately come to terms and reckon with their own culpability and accountability. And I was wondering if you could talk to me about that, because when you say that what happened after, the crime and the punishment starts taking place is more interesting. Like in some ways that's true, but in other ways, like Robert Chambers' story after the killing of Jennifer Levin, like by your own account, is like at best banal and at worst, like, utterly pathetic. Like, I mean, am I too harsh in that regard?
You know, I get it. No, I totally get it. Look, I mean, you quote yourself, just to throw a few quotes at you yourself. Like
Oh, okay.
I love the Buddhist like idea that quote everyone has their own reality, and you have to recognize that their reality differs from your own. These are your words from your Buddhist mentor, right?
Oh,
So
I
Robert
love
Chambers,
this. Oh, I love this. Thank
yeah,
you for throwing that back in my face. Let's go.
yeah. Let's get let's get to it. Yeah. So the thing is, Rob has his own reality he's living, and
Mhm.
it's not. And look, I mean, is he rich with accountability? That is he does he like Robinson, high on heroin his whole bit. I mean, it's difficult. I had one show made about me by Chris Cuomo, and I turned that into a book deal. Like he hasn't done the work on himself, like to sort of like find himself and to get
Mm.
real with himself. And that happens when you're high on heroin for your whole life. You don't grow emotionally. But I have to say, like I had access to him, and in different areas, of I observed him when he wasn't looking. That's what happens when you're a journalist in prison. You see these moments of humanity and sometimes people that you may not think it exists.
Mm.
And you know I don't know. Like I think when that show came out, when your show about him came out, when Ricky Stern show was kind of like a sister to the Ricky Stern show. I'm familiar with what you did about Rob. I think he had been in jail 33. So this is what I'm seeing, right? The
Mhm.
Buddhist quote: "Everyone has their own reality." So this is, it's easier. It's point of view in writing, right? Because this is what you get when you're on the ground and you're in prison. So just to set the scene, as I did in the book,
Mhm.
when that AMC show came on, there was a TV that was hanging in the common area, and you know about common areas. Everyone's
Mhm.
watching what's on the tube, and
Mhm.
they're fighting over the TV, but they all tuned in to Rob because Rob's
Mhm.
right up there in cell 247, and Rob has the sheet across his bars. So while everyone's watching his life unfold 33 years later.
Mhm.
And what the worst thing that he did, and then in commercial breaks, they're running up to the cell and they're saying, "Did you really steal that car? Did you?" And there's no bedside manner in prison, right?
Mhm.
So this is what I see, right? So this is still a human being, and this is so he doesn't look at the media as necessarily being on his side while I pressed him about while it trashed Jennifer, which it most certainly did. I will. He hates the media, kind of like the parts of the media that were, you know, that he never wanted this. He never wanted to be the preppy. He did something that he can't put words to because you know what? A lot of us can't put words to it. I've been very
Mm.
fortunate that I've been able to sort of I put words to it because I went back because I've had a career in journalism,
Mhm.
and I had the best editors in the world press me on writing from these different places. You went back and forth with Atlantic editors. You know what it is,
Oh, yeah.
and they're going to press you, and they're gonna make you crystallize, and they're gonna push back a bit, and they're gonna say, "What do you mean when you say this? You do realize how this? I mean, this is what goes on, but nothing else goes on in these prisons in terms
Mm.
of like how do you feel about what do
Mhm.
you do with what you did, John, with murdering a man? I've been in prison 24 years. Rob
Mm.
33. Never once has he asked to grapple with that. They know he's sniffing dope. They know he's trying to escape. They all know. They know everything. Nobody gives a fuck.
Mm.
So, it's just this idea. But even still, I saw moments of humanity with him trying to help people that are deaf. He took sign language. I try my best to do that because you all can't see that, and it ain't
Sure.
campy. I'm not that campy writer. It's just look, the dude's not a monster. He
Sure.
he he did what he did, and he doesn't know how to put words to it. But he also has some decency to him too. And I just hope that could be seen.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that that is true and relevant, and I think a very important thing to acknowledge, especially for someone in his position who has been so radically turned into just like a supervillain, inspiring the American, psycho movies thing. Like, like everyone just sort of looks at him as that classic 80s psychopath. And so I think that that's fair to humanize him after he's been dehumanized, and and finding those moments of complexity. I mean, I do the exact same thing with my own prosecutor when, I acknowledge that like he was the mastermind of like ruining my life and attempting to put me in prison for the rest of my life for something I didn't do. And yet he's also somebody's grandpa, and he has lots of cats and dogs, and like he's a full flawed human being who is living in his own reality. And and I found myself becoming frustrated with the Robert Chambers of your account in a similar way that I found myself frustrated with the Giuliano Mignini of my own account, and in the way that, like, especially I sort of position the very, justified frustration that my mother feels towards him, where she's like, I don't care if he likes dogs and cats. Does he acknowledge what he did? Did he say he was sorry? Like, does he truly like understand how he harmed you and how he shouldn't have harmed you? And like in lieu of that, it's like some people are find it really hard to live in that cognitive dissonant space of holding that person's human fragility in mind. And and so I do think that that's all very interesting and relevant and important, especially when we think of terms of like how we then respond to crime in real life, given the stories that we tell ourselves about it. And I think that's ultimately one of the big takeaways of your book, is that it's not just entertainment. It has consequences that are felt by people who are directly impacted by crime in the criminal justice system that people don't take into consideration as they're consuming it. Um, do you feel like, gosh, where do I even want to go right now? One thing that I was curious about, if you could name, and oh, just to go back to one thing that I wanted to say, I was also the famous one in my prison, so I can really like I wasn't in prison for 33 years, so I don't know what it's like to live, my entire well, actually I kind of do know what it's like to live my entire adult life with people rehashing the story, because they do. But yeah, from a different perspective, I mean, here I am freed, and people are still interested, like tabloids are still interested in my story, like, and it's not even my story, it's just any little piece of me that they can scandalize, they go about that. So I can appreciate Robert Chambers' position more than most people, and still
Being
I
a journalist, you could see,
yeah.
but being a journalist help you forgive. If I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your prosecutor, you showed him a lot of grades, and I could totally understand where your mother comes from, But I mean, you're her baby, and what you went through was horrendous, and but again, that's the Buddhist quote, right? Everyone's looking at this through their different points of view. I mean,
Mm,
as somebody that's written about the system, you know, through all facets, through all, like, really immersing myself. And I try to look at the other side too. Not to say that I'm an impartial juror. I'm a
You have one
professional
minute
journalist.
left.
I'm not an impartial one. But the prosecutor, prosecutors see us at our worst every
mm,
day, day in and day out, and day in and day out. So I read your book. I read a lot of rational. Shocker, people can't account. Even prosecutors, righteous,
mm.
indignant prosecutors, can't account when they get it wrong. They can't account. But you know what? look at it through his perspective. He sees his job is to show up and see people at their worst every day, looking to get away with murder
Mm-hmm.
every day. Like in my case, I'm looking to beat the rap. So this is what they do. So I mean, of course you're gonna get jaded. Of course you're gonna get like this is his life. This is what they do. They're very judgmental people. This. I mean, this is their job, and they become righteously indignant. And so
Mm-hmm.
he was telling you like sometimes we get it wrong. Yeah, so I mean that's how I look at like the prosecutors, like even with the prosecutor in my book with Shane, like like he like I don't, I don't. It's not my position to sort of villainize, the prosecutors that get it wrong. Sometimes they're going to get it wrong, and I'm sorry that that he didn't, sort of state that clearly with you. That was difficult. I'm sure that was difficult for you, and I know you were trying to great deal with it as gracefully as you could in your book, and I think you did. Um, but look, I mean, like it's very hard for people to be sort of like, as they say, radically accountable, right?
Mm.
I think if I knew like through my whole career, like I had to just, just come clean, and I, and not only come clean, but also just like figure. I'm a narrative journalist. I take my characters and I try to understand their internal
Mm-hmm.
motivations and their external motivations. But to do all that and to do these interviews, you better figure yourself out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
why did I do what I did? Like what was that about? Like what
Mm.
so I had to sort of do a lot of work on myself. I'm not saying I wasn't like therapy over here doing the work, but I mean a lot of the work that I did was through the craft, through the craft of narrative journalism,
Mm.
and it helped me sort of understand myself better. Also in recovery, and sort of understand myself through the rooms and all that other stuff too. But yeah.
Cool. To get back to the true crime of it all, um, in your view, what explains the popularity of true crime, which, by the way, is also super popular in prisons? Like you talk about how scripted true crime genres like, Law and Order are not necessarily popular because they depict, you know, defendants as super one-dimensional. But on the other side, unscripted true crime documentaries and docuseries are actually really popular. And despite the fact that they too are often lacking in nuance. So how do you explain the popularity of true crime?
I don't know if it's like I don't know if, I can't speak for what everyone's watching on there too. I know I wrote that piece in the New York Times about I think it's more about what's on the TV. It's saturated. We have cable uh, on, and we have TVs in ourselves. So, like, in many cable stations, you're going to see true crime. Even on the network stations, it's Dateline, it's 2020, it's you know them all, and then they repackage them and they got them on all these different networks. And so I think it's just on a lot of the different channels, and it's ironic that it's on all these different channels, and if it's on these channels and guys watch a lot of TV and they're so like they're gonna watch that, which I found to be ironic. Sometimes I'd be walking by, I'm like, wow, this guy's watching like Dateline at 1 in the afternoon. But I'm not, but not everybody watches that. But I think it's just really been in recent years. It's really just saturated the channels. Like it's just on every channel, and I think that's more of what it is. Like that's what's being fed to the public right now in terms of the scripted stuff. The Law and Orders and the all the cop shows, the whole Dick Wolf universe. I've critiqued him, and I mean that's not true crime. That's scripted TV,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's born out of I've studied him, and his Bible is the New York Post. So like with any writer, he's going to take sort of information and fictionalize it. The problem with Dick Wolf is he shifted into true crime too recently. like as if owning the network wasn't enough. He wants in on true crime too. So he started, having he started making his fictionalized versions of Law and Order like nonfiction. He started making them true crime, and that's problematic.
Hmm.
That's what becomes problematic because those are real people on both sides.
Hmm.
That a generation later, which you'll see, for example, in his shows, New York Homicide or L.A. Homicide on Netflix. You'll see these high profile cases now told in in these are real cases with real names and real victims and written guys that are still really in prison. Walking back from the yard, CEO say, "Yo, I seen your case on Netflix the other day." And he's like, "What?" And so that's when the stakes
Hmm.
are different when you fictionalize something, as opposed to when you're fictionalizing something on Law and Order where they change the names. So
Hmm.
that's where it becomes more problematic, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that sometimes when they change the names, they don't do enough to change the story so it's recognizable. Like I had an experience with that with there was a Law and Order episode where there was Stillwater, there was also Stillwater was a whole movie. Law and Order had an episode where they had someone named Sexy Lexi. Like they don't like it. I think what's so interesting about scripted true crime is it's clearly just taking real life true crime and just like slightly tweaking it so they can get away with it legally and then taking, whatever they want, like spinning it whatever way that they want without any accountability. Um, but like I still think that I don't think that true crime and its popularity can merely be accounted for just because it's there, right? Like supply and demand, there's there's clearly an appetite out there. And I'm wondering if you think that that it can be derived back to just mere morbid curiosity, or if you think there is something more deep and complex in people's, interest in these kinds of extreme stories.
Yeah, well, people watch the worst about others to, I don't know, like we all have secrets, I think, and I got mine are all out there. I think at this point probably yours are too. I mean, at this like, but um, when people watch like awful shit that people did or accused of doing, like they can, I don't know. There's like this idea of I think we all have secrets, is what I'm saying, and I think when they watch it, it's just I think there's an attraction to that because it's like just to maybe perhaps feel better about themselves, where it's just
Mm,
like, well, I know I did this or that, but this fucking guy is like a bit much. Like this is disgusting. Like I mean, and there's this attraction to this, and there's a level of righteous indignation to that, and it's
mm,
just I think it's very compelling to watch as a viewer. Like we all get drawn to that sort of ugly behavior in that regard, and I think there's a little bit of that. Um, Look, sometimes it's a good story too. You know what I
mm,
mean? And I'm not taking anything away from some of the well done true crime. Like I think Serial was well done.
mhm,
I think it's just good storytelling.
mhm,
Um, and I think if it's to an end, which I think in that case, she can make that argument. I don't know if I believe. Uh, I don't know if I believe that guy's innocent, but I'm a hard sell. Um, so I do believe you're innocent, and for the record, and I that's it. Like I think there's certain stuff that's well done, and why people watch it. That's my
mhm.
take on why people watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not an easy answer why people are super into it. I think that there are lots of different reasons why people are into it, and I think that also I think there's even generational differences for why people are into it. Like, I read recently someone I know, a writer friend of mine, was talking about how her mother complained about how the movies these days, she didn't like the movies these days because they are morally nuanced. And she wanted to go back to, I just want to know who the good guys are and the bad guys are. And I want it to be a simplistic narrative that I can follow instead of feeling like morally conflicted. And I think that one of the things that traditional true crime has done, and if you look back at the origins of true crime, I think it was interesting that you write that, or you sort of trace true crime's origins to literature. When I was doing research in true crime, I actually traced it back much further, to, I mean, because interest in crimes has been documented for as long as documentation has even been possible. Like, before the printing press, people were talking and writing about crimes that were occurring in their communities. And it actually, those like publications first started with priests who were using cases in within the community to, as like material for proselytizing. Like, they would literally make a moral story around, if come to Jesus lest you end up like this damned person. So it's always been about moralizing, creating a very black and white narrative that is meant to control people's behavior. And I think that you see that evolving in time. But what's interesting that I've found more recently, and I think this might help explain the explosion of interest in true crime that, came about, I don't know, in like the 2010s ish era, is this like trying to understand the human mind by chipping away at cases of extremity, right? Like, we study our ability to study this mysterious thing, which is the human mind, is sometimes best accomplished by looking at cases of when the mind is not common, right? Like, so in, in cases of medical studies, they'll look at people who have had like the hemispheres of their brain separated so that they don't have seizures because of epilepsy or something. And then they'll do experiments to study, like, oh, what does this side of the brain think that it's doing versus what that side of the brain is doing. And there's actually really interesting studies on how human beings justify what they do and what they think and what they feel, even when they don't actually know. So, like, are you familiar with these like brain experiments?
I haven't done a deep dive like you on it, but yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I mean, I can appreciate the history backdrop that you're offering.
Yeah, no, I'm just, so I would recommend, one book that I would recommend is How Minds Change by David McRaney, because it goes into a lot of this like neuroscience. But my point being though is that I do wonder if part of the interest in true crime cases is that people are attempting to understand our common humanity by looking at cases where it seems like the humanity is not common, or like trying, again, sort of like trying to say, do I relate to this, do I not relate to this, what is universal about this extreme experience versus not universal? Do you feel like that is the case too, or is that just me?
Yeah, I mean, I try. I mean, I don't write from, I don't write from, like, I'm not from a historical academic sort of perspective. I think people are always trying to crawl into the minds of people that have done, terrible things, and I acknowledge that in my book. But I try to use that as a sort of agency and level with the reader, not as a psychologist, but as a journalist and as somebody that I like to think has done some work on myself, and 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 I just try to tell the story from that point of view, um, and and then I grapple with my peers. I grapple with my own with my own sort of thoughts of what drove me to think like that, and to do what I did, and I share that in furtherance with, like, what I'm getting from my subjects, and I think that's more digestible often than these sort of detached, um, sort of academics or whomever, sort of trying to crawl into the brain. But I think that's you're getting on it. That's what that is the draw for a lot of people who watch this stuff and are intrigued by it. But I do come to it through a literary lens. I
Hmm.
I I think I even quote Mailer,
Yeah.
like in like when he's actually that's actually from a review, like that quote of where is the writer who understands the inner logic of violence,
Hmm.
like.
Yeah, no, that was yeah, that was a compelling argument for your book's existence, especially in a way it's almost like you're being the anti Chris Cuomo, right? Like, he has Inside Evil with Chris Cuomo and you're like, "And I have this book, A Tragedy of True Crime." Like basically you are the Chris Cuomo of this version of Inside Evil where you dispel the notion of evil. And and
And look,
and
it's a
yeah.
regrettable agency. I don't do it just sort of like that I have, right? It's like it, and as I think your experience is a regrettable agency, right? Like you didn't like I think you didn't ask for this personal experience, but you made
Mm-mm.
some lemonade ask, right? I think I'm more culpable, and it's this didn't happen to me as it sort of happened to you. This sort of this trauma of this life, right?
Mhm.
Um, I played a part here, a huge part. You know what I mean? I set the wheels in motion here. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a maker of my own troubles. That said, I don't. That doesn't. I mean, I think I saw some parallels in our stories, like that, and it's one of the things that I grapple with, um, and it's this idea of me becoming a journalist, and yes, having to carry and sometimes use my own experience, but not in the way where I'm exploiting it, but to be a first person journalist, and sometimes
Mhm.
that I think bothers is not a strong enough word, but perhaps even hurts the family of the man that I killed. And
Yeah.
I think with the parallel, even though it's not a sort of equal one, is that you go through that a lot with Meredith Kircher's family, right? It's just
Yeah.
like why are you in this space? Like, why do you get to have this voice? And I think it's just this idea, that there were multiple victims in that, in what happened in your case. And I think you said, like, no, you're not going to just handle me and take my story. Like, I'm going to own my narrative, and
Mhm.
good for you, but so am I.
Yeah.
So am I, and that's how I felt when Chris Cuomo came and did that. He not only
Mhm.
did it to me, he did it to three. I mean, it's like it's not just Chris Cuomo. I mean, it's just like everybody that are strangers to our stories are just coming along and arrogantly like retelling and almost by the way, and sometimes they don't even reach out to you. They're just taking your story and just like
Sure.
doing their thing with it. But they just say they're just like, and you might as well just like participate because we're going to tell it anyway.
Right.
Like so for good for you. You did. And I understand, and I understand me, sort of saying like, hey, like, nah, like this is what it is. And I have to be very careful. And my line to walk is perhaps a bit tighter than yours, but nonetheless, there is some parallelism there.
Percent. I think that you're right that like the gatekeepers of these stories have proven to be unreliable in the sense that they have been lazy storytellers, right? Like they've not really. Yeah. I mean, yeah, they have been. They're just lazy storytellers. They're just moving from one story to the next, never really
You've seen
grappling.
one true crime story, you've seen them all. It opens in medias res. It's bang bang. It's police tape. It's like 911 calls. It's like it's drop back. It was a lovely town, and this one, it's like, bro, I've reverse engineered your whole shtick. and it's lame, and I could tell better stories than you,
Mm.
and that's just, and I have more agency, regrettable agency, and yes, that's how I felt, and that's what I feel, and that's what the tragedy of true crime is about. And I think that's what your book is about too. Like it's about like and it's about what your recent series is about too. Good for you. You situated yourself nah, you're not gonna just keep telling my story. I'm gonna I, I'm gonna tell my story. Just like
Hmm.
you wrote your memoir and you positioned yourself as an executive producer. Good for you. Like that's smart. And and it's important too. It's inspirational, frankly.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that one of those questions that your book asks, among many things, is like, not just can I be more than the crime I committed, right? Because we know that you are more than the crime that you committed. That's established. The bigger question is, will society allow you to be more than the crimes that you committed? And that's something that you are still sort of figuring out, right? Like you are, in a way, you do have this established sense of that in prison, where you're getting these opportunities to be a journalist and do all of this work. But like, I get the vibe, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there's like this little haunted part of you that's like, no one is ever going to let me live this down, ever. Like, people are going to be holding this against me forever, or I'm always going to be viewed through this lens forever. Is the is am I picking up on that correctly?
There was always, yeah, that comes from fear,
Yeah.
there was always that. And it also comes from there's no script on this. I can't really reflect on others that have done it. And the last guy that was like you know, very, he wasn't even that successful, but like Jack Abbott, like he fucked it all up. But I'm starting to think, just for your listeners, he was this, writer that Norman Mailer took under the wing, and he had got out and killed again, and blah blah blah. And it was just an awful kind of story for the prison writer to sort of live down. But the idea that that I'm never, that I'll always have a bit of a, there's always a bit of, when I put this book into the world, because it was a nervy book, and I had a lot of fear, and you kind of think the critics are going to cut me down, but it gave me a lot of grace,
Mhm.
and I like to think that's about the work. It's not
Mhm.
about, it's not about like just. I mean, it's about just owning. Like I think, that's just my style, and I think, I think it's open to sort of, it opened the possibilities for, and I think, this is important for me, for what others can do too. So I try not to sort of live in that fear where I'm going to be like, um, sort of have that thrown in my face all the time.
Mhm.
I think it was more of a fear though before the book came out, and I
Yeah.
saw. Look, I've been. You're right. I've been fortunate to build this career, but I think if what I do believe, if people see the work and people see, you hear your voice on the page, they could sniff you out. You're not gonna phone this in. You're not gonna get by with that.
Mhm.
And I think I have been given grace, and I'm grateful for that. Will there be people, you hear a little bit of that fear, at the end of the book with me? I'm like, yes, yeah. If you want to have one up on me, you'll always have one up on me. Just call me a murderer. That's in your purse. It's in your handbag. You got it. If that's what you want to, if that's the card they want to play. But I don't. Yeah, I try not to live in fear like that,
Mhm.
and because it's
Yeah.
toxic. It's shame. That's what that is. And shame is a toxic emotion. And I did 20. I was going on 25 years now in prison. I've took my lumps. They hit me up. They try to gun me down in the yard. Like I'm sorry for what I did. And I did my, I've took my lumps. And
Yeah.
and and I tried to, yeah, I try to be something, that in this place, there's be something more, but while still serving my time here,
Yeah.
and it's a tough career to be a journalist in prison. Um, but I'm grateful.
Yeah. No, I bring it up not to question any of that, but more to say that I relate to it. I mean, you read my book, I can relate to it. That I didn't even commit a crime, and I'm still sort of had to ask myself, will society ever allow me to be more than a crime that I was accused of but didn't even do, which like doesn't bode well, right? Like, and I one thing that I've had to understand is that. eh, Moving on doesn't mean pretending that the past doesn't exist. It means being informed by it and not letting the past as you were informed by it feel like a hindrance, but feel like something that propels you forward. But even then, that is a kind of way of saying I'm free but not free of it, right? Like, you know, as far as I have experienced things, uh, when I have been when I have had the opportunity to tell a story, say, it's very much I like doors open for me when they are through the lens of true crime, when I am discussing true crime. It's not when I'm discussing existentialist literature, say, like that's not the area of expertise that people think of when they think of me, in a world that's more and more obsessed with authenticity, we want to like know who's telling us the story and why, which is which is great if you are a guy in prison who wants to write prison stories. It's not so great potentially if you're a guy in prison who wants to write sci-fi. Like, is there any part of you that aspires to write outside of the genre, and you feel like are you afraid that you might be hampered?
I don't write. I mean, I don't. I mean, I've shifted to true crime after I I had a I was I was doing my thing when Chris Cuomo came along. I was
Mhm.
writing for Esquire. Like I wasn't writing about true crime.
Mm.
I was writing I was writing stories. It wasn't I was writing stories, first person journalistic stories, magazine spreads about life in prison.
Mhm.
I had published the place. This place is crazy. It was a national magazine award. Finally, like I was building a career and bringing readers into this world, not through the lens of true crime, but through the lens of like my life and the life of others. And
Mhm.
sometimes, like for example, that story was about a man who suffered from schizophrenia. And what's it like to be in Attica suffering
Mhm.
from schizophrenia when they drop the gas, when the shit is on, like and well, when you're just trying to get up and just 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 be well and just
Mhm.
get help. Like what is life like? Why does 10 out of 11 people, in America that suffer from serious mental illness, why are they in jails or prisons? So I was writing about social justice issues, but with this sort of, I would like to think, first person visceral voice. And I was writing for the Atlantic, for these different places. What's it like to be banging as a a gang, being a gang, and come to prison and really want to get out and to get into the college program, but like you're still drawn in, and that's the conflict of that. That shit ain't about true crime. Those are social justice pieces, but they're not corny. I'd like to
Mhm.
think they're visceral, they're real. That's why, and it's that voice I was developing. So I was developing. So I Ben was writing about that then,
You have
they
1 minute
came
left.
and they came looking to do a true crime show on me.
Mhm.
So like it wasn't. So I then had a career started writing about what I'd like to think are really important issues, and then you guys like you stuck me into this shit. I'm like, oh. okay. Like, so it was kind of
Challenge
like you woke,
accepted.
yeah, like you woke, like you got, like, that's what I mean when you say you got the right one. You could do these shows about my peers, and they have no, and a lot of them, they get manipulated and they have no voice. You got the right one with me, and that's how I sort of like landed on this path. But that's not, I'm writing a piece right now for the New York Review of Books about the history of Sing Sing and the 200-year bicentennial. Like, I'm a culture critic. I'm not,
Mhm.
I mean, I look forward to what I'll write about when I get out.
So, writer to writer, like just hopping back into it, writer to writer, though, you're the prison guy, right? You're writing about prison. You're writing about all these like human nuances about prison, but you're the prison guy. Is there any part of you that doesn't want to be the prison writing guy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been in prison like, unfortunately, a bulk of my life. And it was funny. I was doing this interview with, I think, on the meteors. I hate the question. Like, and I told, like, I think Brooke Gladstone. She kind of asked a similar question. She's like, "Well, what are you gonna write about when you get out and you don't got prison anymore?" Like, it wasn't like that, but it was a little. I think it's kind of
Your
like what you're.
career is
It's like,
over, buddy. No, just kidding.
yeah, and it was just like. But it's this. I guess the inverse too. I get the like, oh, you can't. There's a lot of disparaging things people can say when you like, a lot of grace too, but like they don't even realize that they're saying it. Like it's just like when you. So you came to, well, of course you became a writer in prison. Like, you have all that time, and you could, of course you got all the material, you got the colorful characters. So so why isn't this a literary renaissance? Like, why isn't this like a
Haven,
fact
yeah.
of
Yeah.
literary ground of like what, like what? So the idea of writing is I find the eye for story so essential for the writer, right?
Mm.
So when I think of, and you think of, and perhaps you could relate to this too. I think of our lives as because I'm a first person journalist, and I hook the personal into the universal when I think of a story.
Mhm.
I think of my own story arc. So my own story arc was, there's a lot of, growing up, there was criminality in my earlier years. Then it was prisoned out for like more than a generation,
Mhm.
right? So there's the beginning, middle, and then the reentry part I haven't yet experienced. But I
Mhm.
but trust, you just wrote a book about it. The reentry of trying to reclaim and figure it out. That's the third act. But there's a lot of conflict in that, right? You just
Mhm.
brought up some points, like what's life going to be like for me out there. So I'm always carrying this conflict of trying to sort of figure the world out. But with that, I also have the knowledge of story, hooking my personal experiences into universal experiences folks can hopefully relate to. So it's the
Mhm.
same way I see story in here. Hopefully I'll see story out there. Like
Mm.
there's a lot of things that I experience that I think are quite relevant on the outside too. At least I hope there'll be people that want to know what that last chapter of life for this personal writer looks like. You know,
Mhm. Yeah.
so
I
I think
mean,
I'll be all right.
yeah. No, I mean, a good writer is hard to come by these days. I mean, you know, well, actually, talent is cheap, but someone who has the determination to deliver is hard to come by. And clearly, you're somebody who has had the cards stacked against them and you have a determination to deliver. So I think that is going to be very valuable and in your favor when you come outside and discover how many lazy people there are out here. Who have not had to like claw and fight their way to have their voice heard. So that's great. On the flip side though, like, in my own experience, this is just you and me, person to person, um, you know, formerly incarcerated person to currently incarcerated person, there is I have found, at least me personally, that breaking out of the true crime box that people wanna put you into. And, for better or for worse, right? Like they either want to put you in there as a product to be judged and consumed, or they want to put you in there as an authoritative voice. Like you have opportunities there because it's again clear to the audience why they're hearing from you about this topic. It's much harder to, like if I want to write something about homeschooling, say, and I'm a young mom, I'm interested in homeschooling, I've been doing a ton of research. It's less clear to a publication why an audience would be interested to hear from me about the topic of homeschooling. So like even though
It's a
it is
great
like,
point.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you've thought
I
about that.
think you have to. You're carrying something. I mean, that question is perhaps more for you. Like it's hard for you to shake that. Like I don't know if I'm going to have that same sort of like identity consumption of that name, like
Hmm.
in terms of like so I see, you know so perhaps there's just like more relating and a bit of projection with the question, like because I get it. Like I think for me, what my saving grace was, and perhaps will be when I get out, is really leaning into journalism. Though it's just like when I find the story, like when you're really sort of like getting the stories of others, and look, it may be some thread of what I relate to. I'm always finding my role in the story, right? Um, but whether it's it may be it may be a piece about others who've experienced what I've experienced, came home after some time, and they're, I don't know, you know what I mean, like experiencing. Like I wrote a piece for the real estate section of the New York Times.
Hmm.
I wrote, about what guys, sort of think about when they're returning back to society
Hmm.
when rent's like really high, and like where do we fit in that world? And these are just like real fears. Like I don't know. So it's just like these other, like, so I think you carry, your experience, but it's in different avenues and different it's different ways you could. I mean, journalism. I'm also a critic too. Like, what does it mean if Leonardo DiCaprio wants to do a guy in prison, play a role of a guy in prison? It's the next hit movie. I'm gonna go to my editor at Esquire and be like, "Yo, fly me out, please. Fly me out to L.A. Like, what do you think of me profiling, uh, this guy's playing a convict? Like, does it have threads of my experience? Sure, and that's what's gonna get you the gig, But
Sounds
I
like you're
think it's
embracing the
more.
hustle.
You got to embrace the hustle, but it's also about good writing, right? And it's about
Mhm.
good work, right? You
Yeah.
can't you can't have you can't have experience. A lot of people have ideas, but to the point you just said, can you execute? Can you show
Mhm.
up?
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be the difference between success and failure.
Mhm.
But we carry our experiences for better or worse. You end your book like that. You
True.
you, you made lemonade. Like, continue to do it. Continue to look for the story.
Yeah.
Um, find a subject that maybe has that maybe a mother that also has her own sort of conflict that may be slightly familiar to you, and how
Mhm.
and are they grappling with their child, like sort of carrying that, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes the good story is like finding a good character.
Mm.
That's big with the eye for story. You have to write about the right thing at the right time and be the best person to write about it.
Can we go back to your book for a moment? Just because there's one thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, um, again, I think was the most compelling reason, like raison d'être for your book. And, of course, you talk a lot about the really interesting ways that, oh, my camera stopped working, but I am still here. So we are good. Okay. So one of the things that you talk about that I was really intrigued by with your book was how you lay out how prison is kind of ironically not facilitating the kind of reformation that we would hope for from a from our from this kind of punishment that we impose on people, especially given the fact that, like, the reason prisons even exist is because they were actually designed as a humane alternative to torture and dismemberment and death as punishment. And with the idea that, you know, prisons give like sort of force people to confront the things that they've done. And yet, you write that there are no therapeutic programs in prison that require you to face having done what you did, like taking a life. And later you write about how, deep reflection can only arrive, if it ever does, when you feel removed enough from the madness, from the version of yourself that you once were. And sometimes that takes years, because after the crime comes the arrest, the jail time, the trials in the prison, watching television in the cell block, or getting high with the guys in the yard, telling one another how the system fucked each of us respectively. And I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit about how how prison doesn't accomplish what we hope for, and how the kind of journalism that you are doing does.
Well, I don't know if I mean, my journalism helped me in my story. I don't know if it's the cure for others. I think we're all on our path, and I look at it like, again, through a narrative arc, and guys are at different stages, like, and usually it does take that path, like the one you just laid out that I recount in my book. I mean, and there are opportunities sometimes. Look, and it's about looking for them and landing them, and creating the turn in your own story.
Mm.
For me, it was when I got hit up bad in the yard. I
Hmm.
got hit in the lung, bad, real bad, and I was just like, and there was a moment, like, when you get hit in the yard, everyone knows you're gonna get hit, but you, and it's
Right.
just like, you're like, these motherfuckers, they didn't even have the fucking decency to tell me to
Mhm.
defend myself. And I just and I was just sitting there. I was hard. It was like tough to breathe. And I was just like, fuck these. Like, you just get so disgusted with this, and with myself, I was disgusted. I was like, look at this. And and for me, that was my turn. You know what I mean? I think a lot of guys have that, and they look for something. And I don't know if it's I don't. I don't know if it's taking the inventory of the prison system that is clearly broken, and look, that's for much smarter people than me. I'm a narrative guy. I'm going to tell you stories, and with those stories, those smart people that make policy and all that shit, they could do what they think that should work better. But for me, you know, I think it's important. I think it's like, sometimes people do, sort of find their turn, and for me, it was writing. You know,
Mhm.
for others, it's education. I think it was a mix of both for me.
Yeah.
Um, and what can I say? I mean, I learned about myself through narrative writing, and really through the work of journalism. I was a self-centered dude when I came to prison. Journalism makes you sort of learn the stories of others, and really have that kind of thing that I probably didn't have much of in my life. And that was empathy.
Mhm.
Journalism, kind of makes you feel, experience empathy. And that's the conflict of being a journalist in prison, because you come to prison, as you know, Amanda. It's not like, they're like, be curious about other people's lives. Yeah,
No.
that'll go well for you in prison.
Right.
But you gotta, for me, at the time that I made that turn, I had already sort of, established my own sort of character, and kind of, I like to think, but look, I've had some pretty hairy situations along the way. But
Yeah.
that was just my path. I think there's a lot of people that create their own paths, even in a really, really shitty environment. But I think this book, to your point, it does show, like, where prison is failing. But I hope it does show resilience. Even in stories, particularly like my characters, like Michael Shane Hales, like
Hmm.
Milton Jones is suffering from mental illness, suffering from schizophrenia, and getting
Yeah.
a master's degree in theology. The irony
Hmm.
of that, um, and because he's in prison for killing two priests. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's just like there's so many of these like paradoxes.
He's replacing them.
And even
uh,
Robert Chambers, like even Robert Chambers, who I understand is a very difficult, sort of character for folks to grapple with and have for to have sympathy for. But we all have our stories, and we all try to find our way. Some of us better than others.
sure, sure. No, I mean, I think that one of the things that I found most intriguing as I was reading your book, and again, like it was a challenge for me to read because throughout the entire thing, I just kept thinking about the guy who killed my roommate and how has so far failed to do so many of the things that you are doing. Instead of making amends, he's making excuses. And I thought it was really, refreshing for me to read from you that, an acknowledgement that, I'll quote it at you again. I'll quote you one more time. The reality is that many in prison refuse to take responsibility for their crimes and fight to overturn their convictions because the courts load them up with too much time. To be clear, while some people in prison are wrongly convicted, few of us are truly innocent. We just want to be. I mean, it's just so frustrating for me because, like, the person the person who most resembles in your book the person who murdered my roommate is Robert Chambers, right? Like, he didn't get convicted and given a huge sentence, right? Like, he wasn't even held accountable for actually stabbing my roommate to death. He was just held accountable for assaulting her, like sexually assaulting her and taking part in murder. And so, like, he was given a lesser sentence and he served a lesser sentence, and he went on to commit more crime. Like, he's on trial for another crime that he committed since getting home, and since getting out, he, has continued to point the finger at me, and it just felt like this person I've tried so hard to not just hate this person and to understand that they have a history and a context, and and all of those things, recognizing that he grew up in and out of foster care and was taken away from his mother at a young age and was abandoned by his father and all of that, like knowing that all of that is a part of his culpability, and yet still not understanding why, and not understanding, you know, why he can't do the thing that you did in your goddamn book. Like, just acknowledge it. Like, why is that so hard?
It is hard. Why was it hard for your prosecutor
Yeah.
not to own it? It is hard. This is an intellectual. This is a decent man. This is a man who is very. It's look. People. It's hard for people to get honest with and try to figure out. Like what it takes a lot of work, and I mean and look. I don't know what the dude Rude Guaide, like like what's his story. I mean, I do know there's a lot of sick, suffering people in here that have like pathological issues.
Mhm.
Like I don't know. Like I don't have the answer to that. I'm not the type of like that's not the kind of criminal I was. I committed a street crime in furtherance of the lifestyle. I'm not climbing through windows. Like that's like again, that's the pecking order thing. It's just like nah, bro, you can't hang out with us. I try not to sort of live in that sort of subcultural sort of mindset anymore, that I'm sort of
Mhm.
ostracizing people and judging people. But so I can't really speak to that sort of criminality. But
Yeah, I know, it's unfair for me to ask that of you.
yeah, it's kind of pathological of a crime. He's clearly has some issues with women, and And look, there's a lot of guys in here like that. There's a lot, like it's, and that's the kind of thing that I used to get like I used to like that's I was explaining that in the book. I used to sort of like hang out with the knock around guys that were also in that lifestyle. Would be like, and especially like the mobster guys, like they'd be like, they're like my friend Simon. Remember the Simon character in the
Yeah.
book? He look at like these guys that like have these like pathological crimes against women. He's like, you know what this fucking guy did? He like for some reason he'd have like the goods on all these guys, and I was just like, he was like, can you imagine this guy did this to this girl? Like, and it was, there's a lot of that going on, right? And I think
Mm.
there's a little bit of a subtle like, we're doing that to feel better about ourselves. And but it's that's perhaps the answer to the question that you propose with true crime. There's some things that we just can't even wrap our head around. Even people who kill, like me, and people like the knock around guys that I'm talking about, but we
Mm.
can't understand it in that sort of like pathological, seemingly like these like if you ask us why we do it, we understand it and we sort of rationalize it. But I've tried to sort of reckon with that too, right?
Mm.
Because that's about like building myself up, and looking down on somebody else, which is really what again, I do come back to that about true crime. It kind of makes people feel better about themselves. So I don't know. That dude just he's suffering. Like think of it like that. I mean, he's suffering, and he's to live like that. There's a lot of these guys in here are suffering. I see it. And if you try your best just to have a little grace and empathy, and you have it. I hear it in your voice. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry that happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those unresolved things. I will say that speaking of Simon, bringing up Simon, Robert Chambers wrote a letter to Simon, and it was actually something I wanted to ask you about. And maybe this is again, because I kept like trying to understand this guy who murdered my roommate and then blamed me. Like, I'm trying to understand if because like in the end of the book, you sort of take this stance with Robert Chambers that like he you humanize him, you show this other side of him, and at the same time you're frustrated with him because he isn't honest with himself, and you say, well, maybe some guys just can't be honest with themselves, and he sort of comes away seeming like eh, not necessarily a sympathetic figure, but at least a pitiable figure. But like there was something about, and you even write like, all these years later, Rob still doesn't know what people want from him, as if like he's just so confused about everything. And yet, like in this letter to Simon, he writes, don't let anyone know what you feel. Your feelings are yours and not to be shared with people who offer no true friendship. Show the same face in all the same situations, so nobody will know what you feel or think. And this, of course, is prison advice, right? Like, this is good prison advice. But a part of me was was reading into that also as like a calculated move on his part for the world, right? Like maybe the blankness in his expression when he's responding to questions about what he did is less about him not being able to confront what he did, but just not wanting to, like very intentionally not wanting to. Like, don't like not basically saying like withholding what he knows people want, which is to know what the hell he was thinking and feeling when he did this. And I
Intentional
don't know.
intentional indifference, perhaps. Look,
Yeah,
I
I don't
don't.
know.
It could be looked at. He's just. This is an incredibly lonely, fearful person that doesn't trust anybody now.
Mm,
It could be this kid, the preppy that comes to prison. I think it was coming from that kind of place. This preppy from the
Hmm.
Upper East Side that gets dumped in gladiator school, and it's just like it's wild in
Yeah.
'89. Can you imagine looking like that and just coming in? And I think it was coming perhaps more from that, you know?
Yeah.
Look, I'm not here to be Robert Chambers' defender. It's
No,
not
no,
a
no,
defense
of
of
course
anyone.
not. No, I'm just sort
But
of, like, reflecting with you here because you've had
yeah,
more,
no, I
I
dig
don't
it. I
know,
dig it. Yeah, I think it comes from more of like just sort of like, yo, like I think he saw Simon at that point just coming to prison, and not that Simon was like sort of like a guy from the Upper East Side. Simon's a pretty knock around guy. He can carry him. He can handle himself. But I think it was just like it was just him vibing, like, and just perhaps even giving, him a piece of his mind. To me, that showed like that he was very sheltered. He's always been very sheltered, and apparently he was sheltered with me too. I went into this book thinking I was going to get something else. Perhaps that was my own grandiosity, but I think. Look, I try not to psychoanalyze guys to that respect,
no, you're right.
and finger scroll down the DSM with call people sociopaths and all this kind of stuff. But I do think, yeah, that was kind of like coming more out of just like, yeah, from contextualizing he stood up. He stood up. He stood up at night, like I think a couple nights because he couldn't sleep, and he wrote to the guy that he kind of liked a letter.
Mhm.
Um, and you know what? He kept it not because Simon kept it not necessarily because he saw Robert Chambers as a friend, because he saw Robert Chambers, because he kept it because he had a letter from Robert Chambers, and maybe that's a little empathy that being who you are that you could have for Robert Chambers. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Everyone is always trying to. I end the book
Mhm.
with you know with his coworker and somebody saying, you could sell it when you get out.
Right.
You could either had a T-shirt, or I'm sorry, a sweatshirt of his with his name and numbers on it. Like like I think that's really more what it comes from. Like you could
Mhm.
sell that online when you get out. And if anyone can appreciate that, it's Amanda Knox, right?
Sure. No, of course. I mean, that's what it was very weird for me to read this book, I have to say, because, like, on the one hand, I'm empathizing, and on the other hand, I'm like, but what, like it was a super challenging book, especially for me to read, but I think it's also going to be really revelatory in all the right ways for other people as well. Things that were, known to me, like the fact that the vast majority of people in prison have had crimes committed against them before they even committed a crime in the first place. Like, I knew that from prison, but not a lot of people know that. And so it's great to like have that sort of there and out there for people to. I think what's great about this book is it gives a lot of different people different things to chew on, whatever your experience may be. Um, and of course, even for me, I learned a lot of things because I was in a female prison, like that. I think male prisons and female prisons have some things in common and then a lot of things that are not in common. And I was also in a very small prison, right? Like there was only 90 people in my prison, so we weren't really like sectioned off into different places, and it was also a jail, so it was like jail and prison at the same time, and it was just like chaos. Um, but also women, so less violent, um, just in general. So, you know, all good, interesting food for thought and just fact dropping. So great work, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Thank you
Um,
so much, man. I really
yeah.
enjoyed talking with you. I mean, we could talk for hours because of our shared
Yeah.
sort of,
Anything you want to
yeah.
share that I haven't asked yet before I let you get on with your day?
No, I appreciate how you also took back your narrative, and it's admirable, and I thank you, for thinking of me and reading my book and just inviting me on your show. Keep doing your thing, and I appreciated this conversation. I thought it was insightful,
You have 1 minute
and
left.
there we go.
There we
That's
go.
my
There's our
goal.
girl. All right. Thank you so much, John. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye bye.
Bye.